The river smelled of rot and rain, old fish and tar, and the smoke of 100 cookfires banked low along the slums. Dawn had not yet unstitched the eastern horizon, and the ships rode the Blackwater like shadows that breathed. Davos Seaworth stood bareheaded on the foredeck of Blackwater and watched the city crouch in the dark ahead. Its walls a ragged line, its 7 domes little darker than the sky. Far away the red keep jutted from its crag, a thorn of stone above lesser thorns. The oars creaked in steady time, and the quiet of so many men listening to their own hearts was louder than gulls. "Low in the water," Mathos said softly at his side. Davos's youngest living son had the long nose of his mother and the steady eyes of a man who had not yet seen the worst of war. "The tide's with us, father." "It is," Davos said, "and the wind's against us, but not enough to matter." The men around them murmured prayers. Some to the mother, some to the warrior, a few to a stranger god with a name from Essos that tasted like saffron and ash. On the Blackwater, they kept their voices low for Davos's sake. He did not forbid a man his god, not when he had smuggled onions for starving men and learned how faith curled around a belly no bread reached. He touched the finger bones in their little pouch around his neck and felt the ridges. Each one a time he had survived men like these nights. From upstream came a ping of hammer on metal, faint as a chime. Davos narrowed his eyes. "Listen." The men fell silent. Another metallic clank rolled over the water, then a groan of chains. Davos looked to the mouth of the river where it widened to kiss the bay. Black shapes lay at anchor there, Stannis' heaviest galleys. Fury, Lord Stefan, Scepter. Beyond them the sea was a deeper darkness specked with lanterns. Salador San's ships were ghosts out there. Lysine silk turned to canvas and silence. "Their chain," Mathos said. "They mean to pen us." "They meant to," Davos grunted. "Men often mean to. Oars steady." He had told Stannis what the city would do if it had any sense. He had smelt wildfire on the river days ago, a bitter stench clinging to the wharfs like fear. Stannis listened because Stannis listened to men he deemed useful, and when Davos said the thing to fear was not only fire but the trap, the chain that could rise from water like a serpent, anchoring wreck to wreck and turning courage into tinder, the king had nodded once. Plans had been made for plans, and Davos had watched a handful of ragged men with coin and knives go ashore 3 nights past with barrels of pitch and little mallets tucked in their sleeves. Whether that work would prove enough, he did not know. Whether any work was enough against a city and its walls, he did not know. He knew only the push of the tide, the weight of oars, and the way a man's breath slowed when he knew he was coming to the place he might die. A raven's croak went up from Fury. Flags moved in the dark, blur against blur. "Signal," Mathos breathed. Davos read it with his gut more than his eyes. He could almost hear Stannis in the gesture of cloth. "Forward. Hold your line. No plunder. No pity." Davos touched his bones again and felt the old impulse to laugh. Stannis never added mercy to his orders because mercy was not a thing to be appended like a caution. It was a choice, and Stannis had made his. "Drums," Davos said. They beat, slow at first, then rising. The fleet moved as if it were a thing with a heart, oars dipping, rising, cutting the black water into furrows. The city's walls woke, torches flared, bell notes trembled, thin and uncertain. An answering drum thudded from the river gate, followed by the crackle flare of pitch torches. Somewhere to starboard a man laughed too loud and was hushed by his captain's fist. Then a glow trembled on the water ahead, pale green as new apples. Davos's throat went dry. Down oars. Shields. The first casks came skipping out of the dark with little hissing tails, pretty as toys. When they struck the water, the green light bled outward like dye, a sickly blush spreading. Then the green caught. It did not flare like oil fire. It bloomed soft and lovely, and then the bloom was heat. Davos felt his eyebrows curl. Men screamed on a galley to his left as the green light climbed her sides like ivy and turned the pitch to liquid sun. "Starboard," he roared. "Hard starboard. Row, damn you. Row." Blackwater heeled as the oars bit. Mathos was shouting orders at the middle oarsman, voice steady, calm. Another cask splashed and spun and spat. A third struck the water not 30 yards off the bow and broke open on a breath, green seeping, and then the wind came. It came in a long breath from the sea, a gift from a god Davos had not asked. The thin night breeze thickened, turned, and shoved. The green bloom bowed before it and lapped back toward the city faster than it had spread. Far ahead Davos saw a line of low rivercraft, fishing boats, rafts, ferry boats, lashed together into a barrier. The green fire found them and crawled up their ropes. Men on the city walls cheered. For a moment, Davos could see the cheer in their torchlight. For a heartbeat, it was a festival. Then the nearest rope barrier burst and swung like a door, and the fire ran down its own sill and lapped backward. And he saw small shapes along the wall pause as if what their throats had formed could not be taken back. The clank and grind of chain grew louder, a groan of effort and weight. Davos felt the Black Betha surge as the tide picked up. Stannis' van, 10 galleys abreast, went into the green glow like knives cutting leaf. Too knife too deep. He saw the fury flicker and vanish behind a wall of emerald smoke that rolled and rolled without thinning. "Mathos," he said. "I see," his son said. "Father, look." The chain did rise. He felt it more than he saw it, the water bucking, the faint rise of hulls. But somewhere far to starboard there was a different sound, a snap like ice breaking in spring, then another, then a grinding metallic scream. The chain wavered. It rose 1/3, then half, then halted with a shudder that sent little shock waves slapping against hulls. In the glow and smoke Davos glimpsed a thing like the spine of a sea monster writhe once and settle crooked. "Row!" he shouted. "Now! Ride the tide!" It was luck or the mother or the work of men none of his crew would ever know by name that kept Black Betha from the heart of the green bowl when the biggest cask went off. The world lifted under Davos's boots with a boom that was less sound than force. He was thrown against the rail and Mathos was not thrown. He vanished and then appeared again tangled in rigging, green smoke licking his hair. Men flailed, beat at themselves, and flung their burning comrades into the river. The water, repulsed by the fire, threw them back, and for an instant he saw their faces flat within a skin of glass like insects in amber. Davos had no time for horror. He bellowed and bellowed until his voice was meat. Oars bit. The Black Betha's prow punched into the low line of lashed rivercraft and split it cleanly. Men along the walls were shouting new things now, and some were running. The green fire had chased itself across the lashings and, under the wind's push, had found the boom of the river gate and walked along it neat as a cat. Far ahead, through a runnel of smoke, Davos saw stone. He saw the heavy face of the mud gate, the iron teeth on the portcullis, the shadows behind it. He saw ladders go up from Stannis' vanguard, sweet mad fools, brave and doomed, and he saw another line of his king's men pushing long boats for the shore, boots splashing, shields up, voices low. He smelled wet wood and singed hair and the iron tang that meant the first blood had fallen. And he saw, like a little flicker of lantern in a cellar, a postern door beside the river gate shutter and ease open on its hinges. Who opened that? Mathos asked hoarsely at his shoulder. He had burned away a lock of hair. He stank like a tallow candle left too near the forge. "Someone who likes to live," Davos said, and felt the old prickle along his neck that meant Varys, who liked to live very much indeed, had chosen his king for the morning. Then another cask struck behind them. Then the bow wave of a burning galley slammed their stern. The Black Betha slewed. Davos saw his son stumble, clutch at rope, find rope, and then the rope came away in his hands like rags. Mathos's mouth formed a word Davos had never taught him because Davos had never had to say it. "Father." A mast fell with a cracking crunch. The deck tilted. Men slid toward green light. A piece of the world was heat and ugly color. Davos did not see when Mathos went. Later, he would remember fingers that might have been his boy's or another man's scrabbling at the slick rail and the weight of them as he seized and heaved. He would remember the sound of a man praying in a tongue he did not know and the voice he used to shut prayer out. He would remember a laugh from a ship that was surely aflame, a high wild laugh that broke off like torn cloth, Memory would make a tapestry of it and line it with guilt. He remembered the black Betha grinding against something solid and then leaping free. He remembered oars hitting stone, splintering, and used strength turned back on itself. He remembered shouting, and he remembered that the portcullis rose. The chain bullied the water. The chain loomed, then sagged, then loomed again, unsure of its right to exist in a world of fire and tide. Some of the king's ships were caught and burned to skeletons. Some barged through. Some were turned into lances and driven at the walls like sea rams. But the portcullis rose, and when it rose a flow of men found the slit of a postern door and poured themselves through. Stannis Baratheon was with them. He could not be anything else. Davos knew him like a man knows the stone he trips on daily. There would be no battle for King's Landing fought at arm's length. Stannis's banner, crowned stag in the heart of a burning heart, surged in the smoky dawn like a thing that had always belonged there and had finally arrived in its proper season. Davos scraped the black Betha along the wharf and flung a line. Hold her! He leapt. Boots struck wet stone. The air along the quay was a stew of flame smoke and breath. He ran, and the men who followed him ran, and the first arrows hissed past like rain gone wrong. The mud gate broke just before full sunrise. It did not shatter. It failed. The lower hinges bent. The upper hinges tore a chunk of stone from their bed, and all that purpose sagged. Stannis's men went over it like water over rock, and Davos followed them into the city. Inside the gate, the streets made no sense. Davos had walked King's Landing in quieter days with sacks under his coat and a different kind of fear in his belly. He knew the ways a mouse knew the kitchen, where scraps fell and where boots trod. War made all the old paths new. Barricades had grown across alleys remembered just now. Ragged affairs of barrels and carts piled with rubble and stinking straw. Men behind them yelled and jabbed with spears. There were gold cloaks among them, and men in patchwork and boys. The boys slipped first. The gold cloaks fought by habit until they saw whose habit reigned, and then some turned their cloaks inside out, making honest brown out of gaudy gold. Some fought to the end. Davos stepped over a sergeant who had bled out into his own helm, then stooped and set the helm aside and told himself the man could look for his headgear later in the light. The hound was not at the gate. Later, men would tell the tale of how the king's dog had smelled the fire and broken, how he had spat a curse in the king's face and gone away into the city like a wolf that knows when a pack is not his. However true or false that tale Davos saw, the vacuum it left. Without the hound, the men who might have raged with him raged alone. It is hard to rage alone against the tide. The first of Stannis's ladders went up against the inner curtain of the river wall, and men climbed into a storm of arrows and boiling oil and laughter that sounded like bravery because no man could afford to hear fear in it. Davos took a different way, because men who had smuggled onions into the city could smuggle swords, and a narrow stair between two taverns eventually rose to a little yard with broken chickens and a dead tree that gave onto the slope beneath the wheelhouse. He had once hidden here from customs men who had been paid well to search everywhere but here. Now he raised his shield and ran, and the men behind him came as if they had all smuggled something once and remembered that the price of the thing was not always coin. The wheelhouse door had 2 bars and 3 men behind them. One of them was Lannister Red, one was Goldcloak, and one was no one at all, a man whose tunic had torn and was now a dirty scarf around a shoulder that showed an 8-pointed star that might once have been white. All 3 died quickly and without any new knowledge. The chain wheel heaved under its own disgraced weight. Pitch smeared on the crank housing had gone to glue under heat and clogged the gears. Iron filings had been judiciously sprinkled where they ought not to have been. The chain lifted in a torn gasp when a dozen of Stannis's men put their backs to the crank, then settled again like an old debt forgiven out of pity. It would rise no further and would not fall either. It hung in the water's throat and coughed. There were fights elsewhere that mattered more than the chain now. Davos led his men along the river road and up toward the Fishmonger's Square, where there was a wide patch of open ground and, on its far side, the slope that ran up to the Red Keep like a stone tongue. He saw small folk scattering with children and clay pots and broken swords, and he saw a group of septons, white robes blackened with soot, handing out little cups of watered wine to anyone who had hands. One of the Septons met his eye and lifted a hand as if to bless him. Davos looked away. He had learned long ago that a man can bless another man out of the goodness of his heart and still be dead by noon. Stannis' standards went past at a steady push. The king on foot among his men, visor lifted, mouth a hard line. He did not raise his sword when he saw Davos. He did not need to. "Lord Davos," he said, as if they were in a hall and not in a city learning what war felt like from the inside. "With me." Davos fell in. He had bled some from somewhere and did not know it. His left boot squelched strangely. It might be water. It might be something else. The king's knights made a wedge around Stannis' shoulders. Men in good steel with tight mouths. Melisandre was not among them. She did not love the press of men. Davos had seen her days ago on a high rock out on the bay, arms wide to the wind, face lifted as if she could drink starlight. She would be watching, he supposed, for omens of a morning promise to her in flame. An arrow hissed and nicked the lip of Stannis' visor. He did not flinch. "To the Red Keep," he said. "We end it there." They climbed the slope. The Red Keep's walls were older than sense and just as unforgiving. The main gates were stout, but stoutness means little when a city has been turned on itself. The gatehouse had soldiers still loyal to their last orders. It had, as well, a rat run of passages and doors worked by men with better orders. Above the main gate, a flag dropped, a plain white square. It hung for a moment like a confession and then found the air. A cheer swelled from Stannis' men that was not like the laughter earlier. It had relief in it and a little awe they hid quickly. Davos did not cheer. He watched the gate's small postern open and saw the spider step out of his web. Varys was fat. Varys was soft. Varys moved like a man who had never stumbled in his life. His robes were soot-smirched, and his smile was the smile men put on when they mean to live well in hard times. He sank to one knee in the dust before Stannis, unhurried. "Your Grace," he said, "King's Landing is yours, if you wish to take it." Stannis regarded him for a long heartbeat. If he mistrusted a gift, he took it and assessed the poison later. "Rise," he said. "Show me the way." The way led through galleries built to make men feel small. The way led past suits of armor that had never known sweat and under tapestries from places Davos had never heard spoken of by any sailor. The way led at last into a hall with a chair that was not a chair. It was a thing made of the threat of 100 swords. It was heavy and ungainly and not at all comfortable to look at. Stannis Baratheon stood at the foot of the Iron Throne and did not climb. "Where is the boy?" he asked. "In Maegor's Holdfast," Varys murmured. "With his mother and the remaining court. Perhaps it would be politic to—" "Open it," Stannis said. "If they surrender, they may live. If they resist, they die." "There are women within," Varys offered, politely unhearing. "And children. The Lady Sansa Stark is—" Davos saw something pass across Stannis' face. It was not softness. It was the map of the realm drawn in a man's mind with all its roads and pitfalls. "Open it," he repeated. Varys inclined his head, turned, and drifted away like a man who had remembered a simpler errand. Stannis stared at the throne for a while. "Those swords are not bent well," he said at last. "No, Your Grace," said Davos. "You think me harsh," Stannis said, not turning his head. "You have always thought me harsh. I think you just—" Davos replied quietly. He could still smell his son on him, a bitter ash. "Justice has a cost," Stannis said. "It is often paid in coin not one's own. I will pay mine. Others will pay theirs." He limbed the steps then, slow and unceremonious, and did not sit. He put his hand on one jagged arm of the throne and stood as if claiming a thing without love for it. By the time Maegor's Holdfast surrendered, and it did surrender not bravely or well, but with a speed born less of fear than of the knowledge that there was nowhere to run, sun stood like a coin in a tarnished dish. The drawbridge lowered with a grinding sigh. The queen came first, hair unbound. A boy's hand clutched so hard the knuckles were white. Joffrey's mouth was a pale thin line. Tommen cried small sounds he tried to swallow because he knew boys were not supposed to cry. Sansa Stark was there, white as milk and walking with a grace that did not match her eyes. Maester Pycelle waddled, grandmother of something or other Varys did not name. A clutch of courtiers like carrion birds too slow to take wing. Tyrion Lannister came last, leaning on the arm of a boy with a bag of a face, a ribbon of blood on his cheek, half his nose gone. He looked smaller than Davos had imagined. He looked like a man trying to look like a Lannister and deciding it was too much work. Cersei Lannister paused at the foot of the throne and stared up at the swords as if they had betrayed her. Perhaps they had. She did not kneel. "You," she said to Stannis. She did not spit. Davos thought she had used up her spitting sooner in the day. "If you are a king, you were made so by murdering your brother." "My brother killed himself with pride," Stannis said without warmth. "And with you." He would not listen. He would not bend. He would not come to me. He took my bannermen and my home and laughed. He paid for his laughter. You paid for yours when you laid with another man and called the fruit of that coupling a king. Joffrey drew breath to speak. The sound that came out of him was thin. "Silence," Stannis said. It was not a roar. It was a word set down on a table like a blade. There was an old order to such days. The highborn judged the highborn. If the old orders held, a court would be convened, accusations made, witnesses heard. If there were time, if there were any need. Stannis did not have the patience in him for the pretense that had condemned his brother's good hand. He had a letter, sent to him by that hand, naming the truth that had begun all of this. He had bastards in the city who looked like Jaime Lannister more than Joffrey Lannister did. He had an army. He had a throne he did not wish to sit. "I will hear what you have to say," he told the queen. "Say it." She laughed. It was an ugly sound. Say it to whom? To the brother who killed his brother to take a chair. To a smuggler clothed in cloth he did not earn? To a eunuch? To a maester who swears to any king who feeds him? Say it to these dogs? I will say it to your God, wood or fire or stone. There is none of that here. I will say it to the truth. I did what I did and I would do it again. I will not kneel to you. I will not beg you. And if you mean to kill me, do it before I speak any more words meant to make you feel better about yourself. She looked at Joffrey then with a gaze Davos recognized from docksides at dawn. Love streaked with despair. "Kneel," she said to her son. "No," Joffrey whispered. "Kneel," she said again, but not very loudly. He knelt. It was stiff and ugly. He knelt to know God. He knelt because a man in iron had a sword that could reach him faster than any lie could. Stannis stood long enough to make the silence feel like a real thing in the room. "Joffrey Waters," he said, and it was the first time those words had been spoken where men could not pretend not to hear them. "You are no king. By the laws of my brother Robert, and by the laws of those who made kings before him, you are a bastard born of incest and treason. You sat the throne that was not yours and ordered the death of men better than you. There are those in this hall who would say your age excuses you. There are those who would say a child does not know a crown from a toy. I say a child may be a sword if a man grips the hilt. I will break the sword, and the hand that held it may answer later." Cersei drew herself up tall and put her hand on her son's hair. "Touch him and I will kill myself," she said flat and plain. "Do not," Stannis said. "You will face your own judgment. He will face his." Ser Royand. A knight stepped forward. In the smoke and the odd green glints that still clung to metal in that hall, his armor looked charred. He took off his helm. He was young enough to have looked handsome but for the soot. "Do it," Stannis said. They had a block because men of sense keep their tools close. Somebody had scrubbed the blood off it. The hall had a sound to it now that Davos had heard in small rooms on bad nights. A vacuum where breath should be. Tommen made a small noise and was hushed by the old woman Davos suspected had more iron in her than most men in the room. Tyrion Lannister leaned on the boy and examined the middle distance with eyes that did not want to know where they were. Joffrey died like a boy who had never learned that anyone might say no to him. He would not stop warning them. He warned his mother that he would tell his grandfather. He warned Stannis that men would come and kill him for this. He warned 3 times, and then the warning broke on the block after his head did. Even men who had killed before looked away. Stannis did not. Cersei did not. When it was done, she tried to fling herself mouth open at the nearest blade. But 2 of Stannis's knights were ready for that kind of mercy. They took her away. She went out of the room walking. Davos would remember that and could not decide if it meant strength or emptiness. "Ser Mandon more," Stannis said, and the room found not quite a murmur. "Your charge." They brought Mandon on a litter. His throat had been cut neatly where a knife would have done the most. Perhaps it had been. The tales that would be told of that more. Ning would not agree on who threw him from the bridge of a burning ship and who saved the hand's life with a long spear. Podrick Payne looked at Stannis with the eyes of a boy who would never be certain again of anything in his life except that his lord had asked him to stand there and he had stood. "Maester," Stannis said. "See Lord Tyrion tended. He is my prisoner until I know what to do with him." Tyrion smiled with half his mouth. "Your Grace, if you wanted to save yourself the trouble, you could put my head on that block and see if any of the swords have grown sharper with use." "I do not kill useful men when I can use them instead," Stannis said. "You will answer for your father's crimes if you answer for anything. Until then, you will be silent." "Most women I know have tried to make me do that," Tyrion said, and then he swayed and would have fallen if the boy had not held him. By that afternoon, the Red Keep was a midden of living and a charnel of other men's versions of order. Melisandre came through its corridors with her red cloth trailing over wet stone as if she did not see any of it. She moved to a window where you could see the smudged city and the harbor with its floating bones, and she breathed deeply. "Black gives way to red," she said, "and red must yield to gold in the end." Davos wanted to ask her what that meant. He did not, because any answer she gave him would smell like answers and not like truth. She turned to Stannis and bowed. "The Lord of Light favored you," she said. "He favors you still. Do not presume to speak for a god," Davos said before he could stop himself. Melisandre's smile was kind enough. "I do not presume. I read his will as written in flame. We won because of wind and men and iron." Davos's voice was raw. "And because some rats in a wall turned. And because a boy who had never met his fear before met it and ran. And because a chain broke. I did not see your God do this work. Yet you live to doubt him," Melisandre said softly. "And you think that is a small thing?" "Enough," Stannis said. He had shed his helm and gauntlets and looked older. "The night's done. We have the day. Make me a court." Melisandre inclined her head. Davos watched her go and thought, not for the first time, that she was a woman who loved the shape of a thing more than the thing. In the days that followed, justice fell like rain. Stannis set a chair beneath the Iron Throne and sat there instead. He was not a man to pretend comfort. Lords whose names meant something in the city came and bent and were forgiven. Men whose names meant nothing came and asked for bread and got it or did not. The gold cloaks were broken and hammered into a new shape under a commander who had not soiled himself when the wind changed. The man wore no plume and had a dull voice, which was a promising start. The Red Keep's treasuries were counted and found to contain more spiders than coin. The bakers' ovens were seized, then freed, then seized again. There would be no starving if there could be bread, and there would be bread so long as ships could find their way to the quays. Salador San made a show of mourning the ships lost and a better show of counting the gold he had not lost. He had the gall to put on mourning black and made it look very well indeed. "Your sons," Stannis said to Davos one morning when the smoke had thinned and sleep came 4 hours at a time. "I found 3, Davos said, voice catching on the number. "I have 2 left. Dale is gone. Allard gone. Mathos gone. Merrick and Devon live." "I am sorry," Stannis said, in the voice of a man who could count very well. "You are my king," Davos said. "I took my sons to war." Stannis's mouth worked a moment. "I had a brother once," he said. "He took me to wars I did not choose. He made me swallow more pride than any man should have to. He broke my life when he took Storm's End from me with a smile, and then he broke it again when he gave it to another man with a laugh. I will not pretend I have forgotten. I will not say I forgive, but I remember the mornings after his battles when he came to me sand-sore and sun-pink and grinning. And I remember that when he laughed the men around him were glad to be alive. I have never been that man. It may be the realm does not need that man now. Perhaps it needs a different sort of king. He looked at Davos, and there was something like a question in his eyes. Will you be my hand? Davos stared. I am a smuggler, he said, and felt the old coin of shame and pride flip insultingly in his chest. You are a man who tells me what I need to hear. I have had lords for that office. I have had learned men. They gave me counsel that led me to lose and to sin. You have given me counsel that led me to this chair. The realm cannot be ruled from a book or a banner. It must sometimes be ruled by men who remember hunger. Will you take the badge? Davos, onion-smelling Davos, knelt without thinking. I will. Melisandre's mouth tightened when she saw the new hand's pin on Davos's rough-spun chest. Celis Florence tightened further. The queen's men muttered. The small folk raised their heads because the hand's men went to the markets and took not all of every sack of flour, and the baker who tried to tuck coin into Davos's hand found his palm casually slapped open for the insult. Sansa Stark came to court with a new face. No longer the bright coin of a summer day, but something thinner, less easily spent. She stood before Stannis with her chin up and said, Your Grace. In a voice that did not tremble. Davos remembered his daughters at that age and felt something under his ribs that had little to do with duty. You are Lord Eddard Stark's elder daughter, Stannis said. He had never had much use for courtesies. My brother killed your father. That will not be forgotten. Sansa's breath hitched, but she forced the breath to leave and come again. Your Grace, if my father had lived to see this day, why, he would have said the law must rule. He said it always. He erred in the man to whom he applied it, Stannis said. There will be no more such error. He glanced at Davos. The North is rebel still. Their king is your brother. Sansa's knuckles whitened. He is. Would he bend the knee? The girl's eyes flicked, less like a frightened bird than like a mind. No, a beat. Not unless he believed you a king who would keep faith with him when the keeping cost you. That is an answer, Stannis said. If he will meet me with his lords and speak, the hand will see to the safe conduct. Until then, you remain in my charge. Any man who troubles you will answer to me. Sansa swallowed. I had thought, if it please. Davos stepped forward when her voice thinned, because there was a way to speak to kings that girls of 13 learned or died. She had thought there might be talk of betrothals and such, Your Grace. The city hums with them. Little birds say the Tyrells seek to bring their gardens to our stony hill. That will not be, Stannis said, too fast. Then he stopped. Unless it must. He had a wife, and she had a face set like a reliquary around devotion. Melisandre whispered of fates and signs. But beyond the blackened harbor the reach stretched fat and gold, and Mace Tyrell had an army that knew how to march and did not drink themselves into the river. Loras Tyrell had a grief that would keep till winter. He blamed Stannis for a murder no one could have believed if they had not watched kings die for less. But Willis Tyrell had a mind and a limp and a reputation for gentleness. The Tyrells loved to wed. It was in their blood to tie knots that money could not untie. That afternoon Littlefinger came to court as if he had always been there. He smiled with a mouth that did not quite reach his eyes and bowed as if he had been made of silk. Your Grace, he said, I bring olive branches pruned to your taste. Stannis looked at him as one looks at a snake in one's boot. Peter Baelish, I know your work. I hope you know it to be effective, Baelish said. A kingdom is a garden. You must weed it or you must teach the weeds to serve your flowers. The Reach is a garden that grows quickly in any weather. With a little tending, it might be persuaded to twine around your tower. Speak plainly, Stannis said. The Tyrells must be seen with a queen, Baelish said, obliging. Without a marriage, they are army only. With a marriage, they are the realm between the Mander and the Blackwater. Your daughter is too young. Your wife is, devout. The Lady Sansa, though, is the key to the North if the North is to be held else than with spears. Willis Tyrell would not be the least match for her. Sansa's breath made a sound. Davos saw the quick twist of dread and hope in the same instant and felt filthy for seeing it. He looked to Stannis. "Do you counsel this?" Stannis asked Davos, as if the smear of silk and smiles behind the words could be made into grain by kneading. "I counsel the Tyrells must be made to choose a road where we stand at the end of it," Davos said. "If a wedding can make 1,000 men lay down their spears, I have been a worse merchant than I thought. But there is the boy king in the north. There is his pride and his mother's sense. Willis Tyrell will not come to winter. He will want what green men want." Stannis's mouth drew. He looked to Sansa. "Would you wed at my command?" Sansa lifted her chin again. "My lord father taught me that a great house does not always choose its marriages. If the match is what the realm requires, I would obey." Her throat moved. "But if I am to be used, I ask to be used well." Littlefinger's smile sharpened. Pleased. Davos's stomach turned cold. He had seen sharks in the stepstones come to a man's bleeding hand. This was no different. "Leave us," Stannis said abruptly, and the court thinned like water draining from a broken barrel. When they were alone, or as alone as a king and his hand and a highborn girl and a red priestess and the spider and a single old maester could be in a room with 24 eyes, Stannis said, "You will not be abused in my court. I cannot give you Winterfell. I cannot give you your father. I can give you bread and quiet and a bed without monsters under it. If you will be a tool, it will be because you are the only tool that will build what must be built." Sansa blinked hard and did not let the tears come. "Thank you, your grace." She hesitated. "May I have leave to go to the Godswood?" There was no Godswood at the Red Keep, only a tangle of orange trees and pale fountains. But there was a weirwood in the city somewhere, hidden in a sept where men had hidden old things. "No," said Melisandre before Stannis could answer, not unkindly. "There are no gods there for you. There is only you, and the fear that you will not be heard by anyone. Pray here. Pray if you must," Stannis said, dry as old bread. "Then rest." News traveled slower inland. 2 weeks after the bells that were not for celebration had rung, ravens carried to Riverrun the reasonable guess at what had happened, and then men riding carried the truth. Robb Stark listened with his jaw set, a habit that had been a child's stubbornness once and was now a king's fence against ruin. He had married a girl with kind eyes and soft hands who was not the fry he had promised. He had taken the West's border keeps like a fisherman pulls in a net. Deliberately, it was never enough. He was king to men who loved the old gods and could not help but measure him against a father they had set in their hearts as some mountain that would never move. Cat rode a day's ride out alone when she learned and stared at the river until it stared back. When she returned, she asked to be sent to treat with Stannis. Robb wanted to say no. He had said no to her too many times, and each time it had worked for no one. So he said yes and kissed her brow, and Catelyn Tully Stark rode. For King's Landing under a flag that was tall enough to catch arrows and long enough to hide behind if she had to. She came to a city that smelled like a forge and a fish market and a battlefield because it was all three. She found the hand at the edge of Fishmonger's Square with his sleeves rolled and his hands in a flour sack. "We bake in the mornings," Davos told her, wiping white from his fingers. "It makes the men look and makes the bakers work. They like to have the hand in the flour. It makes for songs. Songs are sometimes the thing that keeps men from breaking," Catelyn said. She was too tired for courtesies. It made her kind. "I am Catelyn Stark." "I know you," Davos said. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had lost more than he had yet counted. "The girl has your hands." Catelyn held still. "Is she?" "She is safe," he said. "As safe as a girl with a name like hers can be in a city with a throne like that. She is not beaten. I have made it a thing that does not happen." Catelyn closed her eyes for a heartbeat. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," Davos said. "We have other hungers." They spoke in the King's Solar, a room that had held too many plots and not enough sun. Stannis wore plain black and did not rise to greet her. He made no pretense of apology. "Lady Stark," he said, "you come for parley." "I come because I am a mother," Catelyn said. And because I belonged once to a realm that did not need to call itself one. That realm is dead, Stannis said. We have left it behind us. I would build something that deserves the name. My son is king in the north, Catelyn said, saying it as if the words themselves might anchor the world where it had drifted. He is a boy with a crown, Stannis said. I am a man with a kingdom, and that is in need of order more than your boy needs a title. He held up a hand when the anger moved in Catelyn's face like wind in tall grass. I do not discount your grievances. The Lannisters murdered your lord husband. I have put to death the boy who called himself king on the strength of their lie. I have taken his mother to a clean chamber where she will sit with her thoughts until I decide whether to send her to a tower or to the block. I have not killed your daughter. I will not, if your son will show the sense to be guided rather than to ride into beds of spears. He does not lack for sense, Catelyn said. He has men around him who love him perhaps too much to speak plain. He has me, and I have always told the truth even when it costs me. Good, Stannis said. Then tell him this truth. I will not grant him independence. There is one realm. There is one king. There cannot be two without tearing the land in half between them, and winter gnaws at the seam. He will bend the knee. He will keep the north as he would have kept it as Lord of Winterfell. He will name me king. In return, I will restore to him what can be restored. I will confirm his lordships and his rights. I will see the Ironborn driven off his shores. I will give him leave to keep his gods and his laws. But he will not be a king. He will be my man. Catelyn breathed through the ache that had lived in her ever since she had been told her husband died without a head. And my daughter? When the peace is sealed, Stannis said, she will go home. If she wishes first to be wed to tie a wound that bleeds in another place, she may choose that as her duty. If she wishes to return to Winterfell unmarred, so let it be. I will not sell her like a mare, but I will put her at the place where she can do the most good, which is what the gods, or whatever passes for them, have made us for. You would not marry her to your man? Catelyn asked. Which one? Stannis said with the smallest flick of distaste. I am married. I have a daughter. I seek the Reach because bread is as important as banners. If a match between the North and the Reach can turn swords to plowshares, I would be a poor king not to try. I will not force it if there is other road. There is always another road, Catelyn said, thinking of rivers and floods and how they found new beds. Sometimes the road leads off a cliff. That is why you are here, Stannis said, to tell me where the cliffs are. Catelyn missed Ned then so suddenly that she had to grip the back of a chair. She had come to this city once as a girl with her own man beside her, and she had not known then that one day she would be here without him and with a piece of him that spoke law with no honey. Your Grace, Davos said from his quiet place near the window. He had been silent through much of it, letting the king and the woman measure what they were made of. We have had ravens from the wall. The Lord Commander asks for men and grain. There are wildlings massed in numbers not seen in many winters. There are worse things than wildlings, he says. He is a plain man in his letters. I believe him when he says what he does not want to believe. Stannis's eyes moved in their sockets as if he felt the pull of two strong lines of force. The wall, he said, and the words sat on the table like a black stone. The realm ends there. If the realm ends there, that is where the king should be. Yet I have taken a city that must be held. If I go north, the Tyrells will think me weak and the Lannisters will grow bold in the west. The Riverlands are a mess of old grudges. Dorne writes little and means it's little more than men think. In the east. He shook his head once, as if to shoo away a thought like a fly. What would you counsel, Hand? I would say a man with your name attached to what he does could make grain march south if he spoke as king and not as Peter Baelish, Davos said. I would say the Tyrells love to see themselves reflected in a throne, and we can polish the metal for them if they bring their bread and their oaths. I would say the Lannisters are wounded and will crawl to their rock if we keep boot on their neck. I would say winter cares Lee. Toll for squabbles and the dead care less. I would say go. Melisandre's eyes were on Davos's mouth while he spoke, the way a cat watches a bird. The cold is where the great other makes his play. The night that never ends comes from the far places. The Lightbringer is forged in battle against that night. It cannot be forged against men with banners. Take your sword where it is needed. The throne can wait. The throne is a thing made of shadows. Stannis looked at her and then away. I do not know your god, he said. I know this. A king who sits while the wall is taken is not a king who deserves to sit. Davos is right. We will speak to the Tyrells. We will put a man in this chair who can say no and not mean perhaps. And I will go north. You cannot, Celis Florence said that night, in a chamber where she kept her own gods made into little flames. It is folly. You have just claimed what is yours. You would send me and our daughter to the mercy of a city that hates us and a hand who smells of fish. It is not fish, Davos said mildly. It is flour. The city will not eat your flour forever, Celis said, not looking at him. The city will want meat. It will want shows. It will want to put the red god in the sept and call it just. The city will have bread and law, Stannis said. That is what I can give. If they do not like the taste, they can fast. Your grace, Melisandre said. Her voice did not plead. It never did. The boy Tommen has king's blood. King's blood wakes the fire that slumbers. He must be. No, Stannis said, and his voice cracked the air like ice. There will be no burning of children in my name. It is not. No, he said again. You asked for Edric. I said no. You took my... He bit that off. He had not forgiven himself for even thinking it. I won this city with men. I will keep it with men. If your God wants more from me than what I have already given him, he can take it from me and not from a boy who cries when his cat dies. Melisandre inclined her head, obedient and not at all chastened. As you will, she said. The fires show many roads. Not all led through blood. Some led through ice. Good, Stannis said. Pack winter gear. Davos went to the rookery and wrote letters in a hand that had learned to be careful with words. To Mace Tyrell, your grace's bread will feed a city that will sing your name in winter. To Randall Tarley, duty and honor are words that taste better when one has hot soup. To Paxter Redwine, the harbor you help clear will be good for wine. To Wyman Manderley, I know you like good cakes. Come to court and ask for what you deserve. To Balon Greyjoy, this paper will burn as easy as your ships if you do not put them away. To Lord Walder Frey, bring your grandsons to court and let them swear. I am told there is a little one who sings well. Bring him. We will give him a place where he can sing. To Robb Stark, come. Kneel, do not kneel. I will speak to you as a man to a man. Bring your mother home with you if you would have her see your face. When he had done, he set the quill aside and rubbed his fingers together to feel a life that still belonged to him. Sansa knocked at the Solar's door and came in when he said to. She stood with her hands folded. My lady, Davos said, I am told you sing well. I used to, Sansa said, when songs were about flowers. I can sing the one about the maiden and the bluegrass knight. The ladies at court liked it. I am not certain anyone wants those songs now. Men always want songs about women they cannot have and knights who do not exist, Davos said. They want them more when their bellies are full, though. We will feed them first. Then we will give them lies they know are lies and will sing anyway. Willis Tyrell is coming. She looked at him quickly. How? Because I told him we had lemon cakes, Davos said. And because your hand is worth 1,000 spears. And because he is said to be kind. I do not want kindness like a knife, Sansa said. Then we will see if we can find kindness like a warm cloak, Davos replied. You may always say no. You must know that. The king will not force this if he can find another road. I know, she said, and he believed she did not know. Will the north come? The north is winter in a man's beard, Davos said. It is slow and it bites. But it will come because hunger goes everywhere and because the boy with a crown is too much like the man who would not break the law to save himself. You cannot live in a world where that man does not exist. So you will make another one. She looked at him steadily. You sound like a septon sometimes, my lord. I am what is left when you have no septons and too many ovens, Davos said dryly. Go and sleep. You will need it. There will be a feast of negotiations soon, and they are hungrier than anything in Flea Bottom. The Tyrells came as Tyrells do, with banners like fields at noon and wagons like harvests. Mace blustered. Randall narrowed his eyes. Paxter Redwine wore wine as if it were a perfume. Loras did not come. He sent a letter written in a hand that had not yet learned how to lie well. It said that he was taking the vows of the Kingsguard so that he could protect a king, and then it said that he could not come to court because his armor felt heavy. Davos understood both lines. Willis came. He came limping with a stick and a dog with a narrow, handsome head. He looked at Sansa Stark and did not look away quickly. He bowed to Stannis with a seriousness that might have been a deliberate offense if it had not been so uncomplicated. Your Grace, he said, I have brought what bread we could not eat ourselves. You have done well, Stannis said, which was as close as he came to kindness on a good day. Do not think this will buy you anything I do not mean to sell. I would not dream it, Willis said cheerfully, and then he turned to Sansa and said, My lady, there are gardens at Highgarden where the air smells like melted honey at summer's end. I wish I could show them to you. I wish there were gardens here I could show you and not this. He waved a hand at the city's smoke. We have a lemon tree, Sansa said, earning a startled glance from Davos. Lord Tyrion had one brought to me once. Died. The salt air was too much for it. Then I will see if we can plant one in a pot on wheels, Willis said gravely, so that the air may not catch it. I am very good with plants. They do exactly what you ask so long as you remember what you asked last week. Sansa smiled, and it was small and real. I have learned that men are not like that. No, Willis said. They are not. They walked after, under the pale orange trees that stood in for gods in a southern palace. Celis watched from a balcony. Melisandre watched from a shadow where the light made the red of her gown look almost black. Varys, who had displayed no interest in gardens before, sat on a bench and said nothing and heard everything. When the talks were done, the Tyrell carts were empty and the city's bellies were less hollow. The match between Willis and Sansa had been spoken of and not vowed. A thing left on the table like good bread someone might eat if the stew ran thin, not snatched the moment it showed. Mace had roared and then subsided into wine. Randall had left with a look like a debt carefully folded. Paxter Redwine had promised ships for spring. See, Littlefinger murmured to Davos as if they had ever been allies. A garden watered. A garden where you do not pluck the first fruit, Davos said. Surprising. Baelish's smile cut. All fruit spoils when plucked too soon. The sweetest you leave a while, and then you pluck when it eases into your hand. I was a smuggler, Davos said. When the fruit eased into my hand, sometimes it had worms. Then cut carefully, Littlefinger said, inclining his head as if they had made a bet he meant to win later. The West had pulled into itself like a wounded beast, but beasts fight hardest when hurt. Tywin Lannister wrote letters that felt like iron to the touch and sent gold to places where gold weighed more than old oaths. The Riverlands burned in small fires that made a map of old hate. The Freys came to court with 2 sons and 2 daughters, all of them with mouths that could close over meat without chewing. Walder Frey himself sent a note that smelled faintly of oxen that said he looked forward to kissing the king's hand and had a leg that pained him so he could not ride. Davos watched the Frey children dance awkwardly at a supper and thought of knives and tents and how a man might light laws with a spark and make them burn if he were settled to it. He kept them near bread and far from wine and never let them be alone. Sansa came to him one evening when the sky was the color of scraped slate. She wore a pale gown that made her look like frost. Lord Davos, she said, I would ask something if I may. You may always ask. When the king goes, she said, will you look to me? Not as a ward to be bartered, but as a girl who would be a woman and would not go wrong again if she has a hand to hold. Davos felt old and tired and oddly honored. I will, he said, and I suppose I will unlearn the way I speak to my own girls, because I am told I am overstern and undersweet. I have had too much sweet, Sansa said. By men who were not sweet at all. He nodded. It was a thing they could not speak further without making it too much. He went to Tyrion Lannister's cell that same night. It was not damp. He drew lines at cruelty where he could. Tyrion sat with his mangled face turned toward a candle. "You have the look of a man who has made a choice," he said when he saw Davos. "The king goes north," Davos said. "He will answer the wall. You will go with him." Tyrion blinked. "To what end?" "So that I may be thrown from it by men who resent dwarfs taking up 2 inches too much space upon their precious ice. So that when he speaks to men with thick arms and thicker heads, he will have a man beside him who can show them what words can do," Davos said. "And so that you may stand on something that is not a rock made of old sins." Tyrion's mouth twitched in something like a smile. "And here I had thought I'd spend my days in a dim room counting my remaining fingers and waiting for a man to remember I killed his cousin's dog. The wall. Why ever not? I have always wanted to wear black again. It makes a man's scars seem chic." "You will not be a brother," Davos said. "Unless you choose. You will go as a prisoner with a very long leash. If you pull it, it will tighten. If you use it to lead others, you may find it a leash made of silk." Tyrion laughed. A dry little chuckle that had no joy and found amusement anyway. "If I die in the cold, tell my sister it was of spite." "She will not hear," Davos said and turned to go. "Smuggler," Tyrion said behind him. "Why are you decent?" Davos paused. "Because years ago a king gave me a name and a keepsake after he took my fingers," he said. "Because a woman with eyes like knives gave me sons and fed me soup when I had no money to bring her. Because I know what I am and am not ashamed of it. Because a god I do not trust likes to make sport with men like me, and I will not give him sport cheaply." Tyrion tipped the candle, watching the wax run. "I will try not to betray you," he said. "But I am a man, and we betray everyone in the end." "Do it for a good reason, then," Davos said. On the morning they left, the city stood on the quays and watched. Stannis wore black fur trimmed in nothing. The king's knights wore armor rubbed to a dull sheen. The ships were fewer than he would have liked. Paxter's great fleet could not come until seas grew kinder. But there were ships enough, with names that had weathered narrower straits than those of men's promises. Eastwatch by the sea lay like a bone in a dog's throat up there under it. Elas sky. Stannis meant to put his teeth on it. Sansa stood beside Willis, who had come to see. They did not touch. Davos watched the space between them and approved of it. Varys smiled more than he needed to. Littlefinger smiled less. Melisandre did not smile at all. She watched Stannis with an attention that would have made a weaker man tremble. Stannis did not tremble. He turned to Davos and gripped his arm. "Hold the city," he said. "Hold it with bread and ropes and law. Hold it with fire if you must. Do not let them make it into a feast hall." He looked past Davos to Sansa. "Lady Stark, I will bring you word." "Bring yourself back," she said, surprising herself. He nodded once. "And if you see my brother, I will tell him you have not forgotten his name," Stannis said. They went down the plank. Tyrion, wrapped in a plain brown cloak, paused to look over his shoulder at the city that had made him and unmade him both. He saw the Tower of the Hand, where hands had been removed, and the Great September, where gods had been stripped of the smell of incense and left with the cold air of winter to come. He saw the Hill of Rhaenys with its black dragon bones under the stones of men who had not known they were building on a grave. He saw the Red Keep, raw-edged against the sky just beginning to remember blue, and he saw a little lemon sapling in a pot that someone had dragged up to a balcony. It looked absurd. It looked exactly right. He smiled a true smile for the first time in months and stumped aboard. The fleet slipped its moorings and rode out over water that still had oil dark on it in places. The wind was good. The sea lay open like a road that had been always there and had waited only for a man with stubborn feet. Stannis stood at the prow and did not speak. He was making himself into a shape to fit the place he was going. In the city, Davos learned what it was to be the thing between hunger and riot. He learned how to listen to bakers. He learned when to let the faith ring its bells and when to make the bells fall silent. He learned that Littlefinger, left without the chance to gather coin like harvest in a fat year, could make mischief out of twine. He kept him where twine could make no noose. He learned that Varys was as useful as he was dangerous, and that the trick with men like that is to put them to work until they were too tired to be clever for others. He learned to sleep in snatches and to wake to women's voices that were not his wife's and to not confuse the two kinds of guilt. He learned Sansa's voice and did not mistake her for a child. He learned Willis's patience and did not mistake it for softness. He learned that in the far places of the city, the Forgotten Hill, the Pisswater Bend, men had learned to speak of a king who was going to where winter lived, and it made them stand straighter when they thought no one saw. Messages came and went. The Tyrell grain moved along roads like ants, and men learned that ants eat and feed both. Dorne's ravens said soft things and meant little, but there was a tone to them that had not been there before. Doran Martell was a man who could wait, and now perhaps he thought time might feed him something sweeter than anyone had expected. The Ironborn took the Stony Shore and the Bar Rollins and paid for each yard in men and in gulls' quarrels over their eyes. Wyman Manderley sent Davos a pie that tasted of lamb and secrets and made Davos frown his way through a third slice before he decided the secret was simply satisfaction. He wrote back and said, "Bring ships. From the north, a letter in a steady hand." Robb Stark said that a king bends the knee to no man, and then he said that a king who loves his people keeps them fed and warm, and then he said he would come to Moat Cailin to speak with the man who claimed the rest of the realm for his. He said no more than that, and it was enough. Davos read it aloud in the council and did not look up to see whether Littlefinger or Varys smiled. Then, when the harbor had almost forgotten the sound of green flame, when the city had begun to smell like bread first and bodies second, a raven from the wall landed on Davos's hand and refused to let go. The parchment was stiff with cold, and the ink had blotted from fingers that shook. Said, "We are besieged." It said, "The king beyond the wall comes with many fires." Said, "There are darker things in the woods." Said, "Send any you can send." Davos closed his eyes and saw a boy with a crown and a cold he did not deserve. He saw a king who had taken a city and refused to sit, going to a place where thrones are snow and men sit on them only long enough to fall off freezing. He saw the road that lay between them like a spine of land that might break if the wrong foot fell the wrong way. He took the bird's narrow head in his hand and rubbed its feathered skull until it relaxed. Then he went to the council chamber and called in the Faith, and the Tyrell men who had stayed, and the spider, and the snake from the fingers, and the queen's men with their zeal. He sat in the chair under the Iron Throne, because comfort had never been the point. "The king has reached Eastwatch," he said without preface. "He will fight at the wall. We will feed the city and the fight both. We will do so with order. There will be lines. There will be men with sticks who will have orders not to use them unless necessary. There will be men who will not hoard. There will be punishments, but they will be the kind that teach." He looked at the High Septon, a florid man with soft hands who had found it smart to be humble very quickly in the past weeks. "There will be prayers, but there will be no fires in the September. There will be no burnings in the streets. If the Red God loves a fire, he can love the fire in a baker's oven." He looked at Littlefinger and saw the man's head tilt. He looked at Varys and saw a faint nod. He looked at Celis and saw disapproval worn like a jewel. He looked at Sansa and saw her sitting very straight with her hands folded, and he saw Willis's dog lay its head on her knee. Outside, the winter wind remembered itself and moved down the river. The chain in the mud made a sound a man could not hear but might feel if he had a bad dream. The city breathed. Men sang songs they had sung as boys and had never expected to sing again. A king on a deck of a ship that smelled of tar and hope looked north and did not smile and did not flinch. A dwarf polished a word in his mouth until it was a weapon he could wield. A red woman watched a candle flame and saw a stag, and where its breath should have been, she saw snow. At Castle Black, men assembled on a wall older than their names. The first horns blew. 1 for rangers returning, 2 for wildlings, 3 for, well, men laughed when they remembered that old tale. They did not laugh now. They lifted bows with hands that had cracked from cold, and they mouthed prayers to gods who had watched them die in other winters without moving. Snow fell. It fell like ash and like feathers and like forgiveness withheld. Far off, beyond the trees, a line of fires like a broken necklace moved, and behind that, something that did not carry light came on, slower but sure as moonrise. "Hold," the voice of the king said there as it had said it in a hall, as it would say it in many rooms and on many roads before it was done. And men who had thought themselves alone lifted their chins as if a hand had passed under them and held. The first arrows went up. The first stones fell. The first men died their new deaths and rose to be killed again and again. Behind them, far south where the river widened and the sea showed her teeth and then her smile, a city remembered the taste of baked bread, and a girl who had thought she had been made for songs learned instead how to make a day go differently by choosing the order in which she listened to men. The Tyrell carts rolled. The Lannister west sank into its rock like a sunset. The north sent replies like trees, slow, true, bending only where wind deserved it. War had made men into swords. Winter would teach them what else they could be. The stag's shadow lay long across both. If the tale had ended at a throne, men would have called it a tale they had heard before and left it. It did not. It went on, into the snow where stories creak and freeze and then find ways of moving again. And for the first time since Robert had laughed with wine on his beard and a skinning knife for a joke in his hand, the realm felt like a thing that might survive itself.